Welcome everyone. It's great to see you all. Welcome to our new webinar from the Decade of Disciple Making. Today is a very exciting topic. We're going to be looking at discipling among youth people, with young people. And as we are starting, I actually wanted to ask you, all of us, to do something. Depending, like we are at very different stages of life, but I would like to encourage us to think about when we were young. For some of us, it's still where we are. For some, it's been a while back. And think about one person that impacted you the most, especially in the context of you following Christ, just learning what it means to be a disciple. And please put the name of that person and who that person was, just a name. And let's say, for example, like Peter, my dad, or Mark, my pastor. If you could just do that in chat. Again, think about when you were young, whatever the age range seems good to you, and think about one person that God has used to make a significant impact on you in some way. And please put that name and who that person was for you in chat. We would like to just give glory to God for these people, celebrate it, and sort of begin to focus and think about our topics today. So again, the name and role of someone who has impacted you when you were young. So again, welcome. I know that many of you have already been on the webinars. So there are some that may be joining us for the first time. So welcome. My name is Ruslan. I have a privilege to just share very briefly in the beginning. Today we have some very exciting leaders and speakers at this webinar that I'm just going to share very briefly. We have Craig Greenfield from Cambodia and New Zealand. I don't know which should come first. That maybe Craig will help to give answer to that mystery later. But Craig is an amazing leader that is committed to raising Alongsiders around the world, youth people that are discipling children and other youth. And I've personally been very encouraged by just observing what God is doing through this ministry and through this movement in Asia, Africa, and beyond. And then we also have Vania Christian from Indonesia, another person that I admire, just so grateful to God for what she's doing. She's with Unleashed, also a youth disciple-making movement and initiative in Indonesia. And we'll be hearing from both of them today, as well as from some other people. So I'm really looking forward to our time today. And those of you who joined the previous webinar, you may remember that we've changed the format a little bit. So now we are going to have breakout group discussions after the main body of the webinar. So I believe most of you have already identified what group you will join for the breakout. There are 4 of them. Just to quickly remind us, we have one on organizational like how it works in context of organizations. Another, number 2, is churches. Number 3 is youth, which is both today's topic, but our dedicated breakout. And number 4 is family. If you joined more recently, basically just before this call, please put the number of the group that you want to join by your Zoom name, so that Val will know what group to put you in after we'll break. We'll do that after the speakers will share, and then we'll conclude with those breakout conversations. Again, thank you so much for joining. Thank you, Craig and Vania, and everyone who will be participating today. And now I'd like to turn this over to Craig, who will start us off.
Okay, well, it's fantastic to be with you all tonight. And Ruslan, thank you for opening us up. Could we open in prayer? Would that be appropriate? Father, we know that your heart is for the children, your heart is for young people, your heart is for youth. And I pray tonight that your Holy Spirit would come upon us, that you would lead us and you would guide us, because you want to see breakthrough and transformation in this world. And we see that young people are one of the keys for that. And so we lift that up to you, ask you to guide us tonight in Jesus' name. Amen. Fantastic. Well, let me share my screen and we'll jump right into it. Can everybody see that? Give me a thumbs up if you can see that. We are launching into the WEA Decade of Discipleship. And tonight I want to talk about something that I think is probably one of the transformed by discipleship. I don't think that we could possibly have a decade of discipleship unless we unleash and mobilize and awaken and equip young people. I can't imagine how that could happen. And so tonight we want to look at how some of us have been doing that around the world, some of the keys to making that happen. I'm going to particularly be talking about unleashing and awakening young people as disciple makers. And Vania is going to be particularly talking about discipling young people. Young people as disciplers and young people being discipled. Those are kind of the two key themes that we're looking at tonight. Can everybody hear me? Give me a thumbs up. Okay, good. All right. I want to start with the story of Dali. Dali I met when she was 19 years old, and she's a young woman in Cambodia. Much of the world's young people, the vast majority of the world's young people are in the non-Western world. That's not to say there's no young people in the Western world, but the vast majority are in the non-Western world. And I met Dali when she was 19, and she said to me, she had been praying and really the Lord touching her heart of how she might reach out to a young girl in her community that she had seen walking past the front gate of her home every day on her way to school. And really, her heart was there. That's what I noticed, was her heart was already towards discipleship. And she was really waiting for someone to come along and say to her, just do it. Just do it. Why don't you reach out and disciple this little girl? And this is Dali. We call her an Alongsider in the Alongsiders movement. And the little girl that she chose is her little sister, Monica, a little girl that she saw walking in front of her house every day. Now, she had the girl to disciple. She had the motivation to disciple. All that she was really lacking was the mandate and the equipping. And so tonight, what I want to talk about a little bit is how can we as the global church equip our young people to make disciples? And I believe this could potentially be world-changing. Now, we're facing some pretty major challenges in 2020. And I would say everyone knows that this is kind of an unprecedented crisis year. And the challenges that we are facing, really, we're doubling down on those challenges this year. They've been exacerbated. Firstly, young people are increasingly disconnected from their churches and from their faith. And we have young people around the world who haven't been to church, including many of us, in months because of lockdowns. Number two, young people are much more connected online than ever before. And that's even more true in 2020. And thirdly, young people are lacking that sense of call, that sense of purpose, and that sense of vision. I want to talk about that a little bit. First of all, and I'm really drawing on, I don't know if you guys have talked about this yet, but One Hope, have you guys talked about this yet? One Hope just did a survey of 8,000 teenagers across 20 countries in March and April of this year. Incredible survey. And what we saw was that the vast majority of those teenagers are very much disconnected, very much not practicing their faith in a meaningful way. 40% of Christian teenagers say they have never read the Bible. An incredible statistic. And so what we're finding is, and I don't know if this is what you're seeing in your churches, but young people who are disengaged, who are leaving the church. And this is very much a crisis, I would say, on a global church level. Secondly, we know that young people are much more, this is a no-brainer. Young people are connected online. One Hope survey came up with the number 7 hours online daily, an incredible amount of time spent gaming, chatting, videos, social media. This is an incredible level of online connection that young people have. And all of this underpinned by just a sense of a lack of vision and purpose amongst our young people. 32% of the Christian young people that they surveyed have been sharing or connecting with people of another faith. And so that's not even making disciples, that's simply a conversation about faith. And so we have young people who are not being engaged, not being awakened to share their faith. And this is tragedy, because young people have more energy than any other age group on earth. And they're more open to new ideas. If you want to introduce a new idea to a nation, you would not go to the 60-year-olds. Am I right? You would not go to the 60-year-olds. You would go to the 16-year-olds. You would go to the 20-year-olds if you want to introduce a new idea. They have more time and less responsibilities and very much more idealism and more of a sense of hope. And so I believe that if we want to change a nation, we really need to change one generation, and that is the generation of young people. I can't think of a generation with more potential for change than the young people in our nations. That is true across every single nation. And that's why in those countries where there are uprisings and civil revolutions and protests, those people who are on the forefront of change are young people. It's not the 50-year-old on the streets at midnight in Portland. Whether you agree with their cause or not, it's not the 50-year-old or the 60-year-old, it's the 20-year-old. And so the question is, are we mobilizing this generation to make disciples and make change in our world? And I would suggest that if our young people are not making disciples now, it's very, very unlikely that they will make disciples when they are older and more set in their ways. And so we face an urgent challenge as the global church, and that is to communicate and set the hearts of young people on fire for making disciples, for following Jesus in a sacrificial way in this world. And so this basic call that Jesus had to go and make disciples of all nations, young people have been on the forefront of every movement for change throughout history. If we're going to go and make disciples of all nations without young people, we have missed the boat. I am convinced of this. We have completely missed the boat if we're trying to do this without young people. Let me share with you a little bit about how Alongsiders works. It's a global discipleship movement, young Christians around the world, thousands across Asia, across Africa. We recently trained in 18 new African countries, launched in Europe this year. These are thousands of young Christians who make a simple but powerful commitment to walk alongside one child each and disciple them in their own community. Very, very simple and yet very, very powerful commitment. And what we see is that over the course of 3 years, this is the kind of transformation we're seeing. Churches in year 1 that are reaching out begin in year 2 to see those children who are being discipled coming into the church, very often their own families, and by year 3 are becoming a role model for other churches in their neighborhood. The other churches are wanting to jump on board by that because of the role model of that first church that is willing to lead the way. Now, young people who in year 1 are clueless, they're newbies, they're beginners. By year 2, they can legitimately be called disciple makers. And by year 3, they truly are leaders. And of course, the children that they are discipling, remember, it's one Christian youth discipling one child. Begin very much vulnerable, needy in many ways. Not only poor, but rich are needy and vulnerable. By year 2, they're beginning to grow in resilience. And by year 3, they are becoming transformed. And a vast majority in some countries of those children who were discipled become disciple makers themselves and join the church. So those are the kind of results we're seeing. It's a very simple process. The young people choose a team. The young people are under 30 themselves. They're Christians. There's a basic criteria. They choose their own little brother or sister. They pray to God and ask God to show them who they should choose. They choose someone nearby because we honestly believe in the principle of proximity. I don't have time to share about that, but it's one of the keys. They're choosing a child who is around 5 years younger than them at least. And they make some commitments to pray, to visit, to encourage and disciple those children and invite them to church. It's a very simple model. It's not rocket science, but we have really fine-tuned many of the ways that we equip. And so at this stage, I want to really hand over to Vania before we share some of the tools and keys that we have developed. And what's interesting is, I was sharing with Vania earlier today, that they have actually developed the very same principles as we have. As they disciple youth, the same keys that they use, we are using for mobilizing youth as disciple makers. So Vania, are you ready to take over from this point?
Yes, great. Thank you for the opportunity. So can everybody hear us clearly? Can everybody hear me clearly? Okay. Let me share my PowerPoint then. I'm Vania from Indonesia. So I'm the program manager in Unleash national team in Indonesia. We have just, actually we are pretty new. So we have just launched our Unleash program, our first Unleash program in 2018, so 2 years ago. But we have experienced a lot of what God has planned for the youth. So today, like what Craig has said before, I will be focusing on how can we disciple youth. First question I would like to ask you is why youth? Craig has already explained a lot about this, why youth is very important for us. And I want to share with you a recent article from AEA, Asia Evangelical Alliance. They say that during COVID-19 in Indonesia, they found that the greater the percentage of young people in a church, the more likely that the church actively care for the poor, have more compassion and generosity, engage more in prayer, promote unity in the body of Christ, be more holistic in their theology, and engage more with their surrounding community to promote societal transformation. They are like seeds with lots of potentials, and they have the power to push the church to go beyond the church walls. So if what we want to see transformations happens to our church, we need these young people. We need to disciple them. So what do we want to see when we disciple them? As Craig has mentioned before, we want our youth to disciple others. A disciple of Christ is someone who disciples others. Or we could also say that they are resilient disciples, characterized with youth regularly go to church, have an intimate relationship with God, share the gospel, help others grow spiritually, find life purpose, and have a hopeful life. But to get there, we need to know where we are at today. So we need to face the brutal facts. Let me share about the current condition in Indonesia. The research in Indonesia had found that 80% of youth in Indonesia received Christ before 15 years old, which is actually very great news. But today, 80% of them are no longer at church. They had left the church, and it's a really huge wave. So what are the main reasons behind this wave of youth leaving the church? The statistic shows that more than 50% of them say that the youth service is not relevant, not interesting. Second, because they feel no engagement or involvement in the church. And third reason is because they feel disconnected and have communication problems with the church leaders. Let's take this moment to think about how about your country context. Do you see any similarities in your youth? To tackle this issue, churches in Indonesia have offered lots of things to the youth. Among them are interesting or engaging sermons, creating small community, leadership authenticity, and assigning spiritual youth mentors. But which one is the most effective strategy? All the other strategies also work to some extent. In Indonesia, we found that the most effective strategy to disciple youth is through community. They became resilient disciples when they found their best friends at church. This aligns with their psychological milestone during teenage years, where they need acceptance from friends. This result is also consistent with Barna's finding that Christian youth wish to have their friends attend the worship service. Youth needs their peer, a community that accepts them unconditionally, people who encourage them and grow together with them to be more like Christ. So we need to create a healthy spiritual community for the youth. So in this point, I want to share with you a short testimony. So I'm in Unleashed program. So we are discipling youth in Indonesia. Last year, we made a partnership with a church in Jakarta. We always make a community. We call them squad, and each of the squad is consisting of 5 to 7 members. In this church in Jakarta, they have only about 10 to 20 active teenagers in their church, and 10 of them participated in our program. They have their own youth service, and they also hold a small group discussion after the sermon, which is very great. They even have young adults assigned to them as their mentors. But when we went there, we found that the members didn't really bond with each other. Their interaction ended by the time they got home. They are in the same boat, but each of them didn't know where to sail, or perhaps if each of them has their own direction, and the boat ended up not going anywhere. I remember Acts 2:17 says, "I will pour my spirit on all people, and your young men will see visions." I believe without vision, the community will not grow and they won't be able to become resilient disciples. So we came to them and we challenged them. We gave them a short-term goal, which is to manage the first youth gathering in their town. And they accepted the challenge, not knowing that actually they were growing a lot day by day. They prayed and communicated almost every day, and they started to care more for each other. And then, this is the picture of their first project. After their first project had finished, they continued to believe that they can do more to bless others. They had learned where to sail together. Later on, many more projects came from their own initiatives. This is the picture of one of their initiatives in flood disaster relief on January, as well as creating DIY face shields for medical workers on April 2020, when the COVID-19 started to emerge in Indonesia. From the experience, I learned that there are 3 keys to build a healthy youth spiritual community, which is actually almost the same with Craig, 3 out of 4 from Alongsiders points. So the first one is idealism or vision. We need to inspire the young generation to have a great, heart-stirring vision. We need to challenge them to take responsibility, to do something beyond themselves. Give them space to dream and maximize their potential. You will be surprised to see their dream and vision. I believe you will see the spark in their eyes. Recently, I asked the 3 kids in Semarang, one of the town in Indonesia, what do you have? You are a team, so what is your goal? And suddenly they said, I want to develop my village, from the mouth of 16, 15 years old kids. And they also need to have ownership. The community belongs to them and not us. Their vision, strategy, ideas have to come from their own initiatives. Involve them and engage them in every decision made in the team. Our duty as adults is to challenge and stretch their capacity by giving them critical questions and inspiring resources. Last but not least is the sense of belonging. Create a social identity for them to feel proud to be in the community. Celebrating small wins, exhibiting their projects, and other things to appreciate their progress and efforts will be valuable for them. Remember to always notice the unnoticed. Make sure no one is left behind. Teach them to take care of each other. Now, although currently we are faced with the COVID-19 pandemic globally, but this situation should not hinder us from building a healthy community for youth. The pandemic is actually an opportunity. Today, lots of youths are suffering from loneliness and boredom. So church can show that we sincerely care about them by building a community where they can share and pray for each other, where they feel they belong to each other. Today, lots of youth don't have a purpose, dreams, nor vision in their lives. With many problems lie before us, we can challenge them to work together in their communities to take action and contribute to the society. So are you ready to disciple this powerful youth by building together a healthy community for them? Thank you for listening. May God's power and guidance be upon all of us. Back to you, Craig. Thank you.
Thank you, Vania. That is fantastic. And Vania has been over in Cambodia. I've been over in Indonesia, and just seeing how God is simultaneously rising up and raising up young people across the world. We believe that there is something very special happening right now. God has given us a picture of a wave that is rising up all around the world. And I first saw this picture of a wave at the 414 conference in Bali, Indonesia, back in 2015. Many of you were there. And we believe that God is raising up a wave of young people across the world to change the world. And the church has a choice, really. We can be on the beach facing the wrong way as the wave goes by. We can be drowned by the wave, or we can be somehow up on top of that wave, trying to be a part of what God is doing. And I believe God is doing something new across the world. So I want to share with you, I want to actually double down on what Vania said, because Vania's, surprisingly, 4 keys are really actually the same as ours. She had 3, we have 4. And the first one that she mentioned is the sense of belonging. These are really the keys. If you're going to write down anything tonight, these are the keys for mobilizing youth. If you want to see your young people engaged, this is it. And first of all, Vania said this as well, that sense of belonging. There is a window of opportunity in a young person's life. Before the age of, teenage years, you are family oriented. After those years, you're also family oriented. But there is this window where you are very peer-oriented, and what your peers think is incredibly important. And so if we want to mobilize youth, we need to give them a sense of belonging to something that is greater than themselves. We need to give them a sense of, you are a part of this. Secondly, and this is incredibly important, we really miss the mark on this very often in the church, and that is we've got to give them a sense of ownership. If we cannot get our hands off and allow them to lead, allow them to choose who they will disciple, allow them to choose the ways in which they will engage with the community, we will simply be stifling their creativity and their sense of wanting to own and be empowered. And I want to take a moment now just to shoot a quick moment over to Machan, who is our coordinator in Europe, because he has seen how this principle has been worked out. Machan, can you jump on and share a quick story?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Craig, for allowing me to do that. Can you hear me well?
Yeah.
That's good. Because I wanted to introduce you to Tom. Tom is a young man that I've known for quite a long time, and about 2 years ago or something, he applied for an internship in Cambodia, which was the same place that we were serving by then. And Tom was exposed to Alongsiders. He saw Alongsiders in action. He was at our campsite, and he saw Alongsiders walking alongside their little brother or sister, and it was very inspiring to Tom. And I remember Tom and myself sitting in a cafe drinking coffee, just talking for hours about what he saw and how it impacted him. But the time came that Tom had to go back to Europe to just continue his studies and everything. And our conversations went about, Tom asking, can I be an Alongsider myself in Holland, where in Rotterdam, where I live? And of course the message was yes, do it, take it. You've seen it. And of course the context is different, the language is different, the culture is different, but we don't care. Take what inspired you and bring it to Holland and do it. Just do it. And so Tom went and he did it. Now, about 5-6 months ago, my family and I, we returned as well to Holland to start the Alongsiders movement here in Holland and into Europe. But the Alongsiders movement already started, because what Tom did, he mobilized 5 other youth in his church, and he just made a small group, and he started impacting. They all chose a little brother, and Tom chose Juvencio, and his brother Willem, he chose Joseph, and so the others as well. They all had a little brother or sister, and they faithfully began to walk alongside that brother. And so before we came back to Holland with the ambition, with the dream, with the calling to start Alongsider, it was already taken there by Tom, because he felt it, he saw it at campsite in Cambodia. And that's the really cool thing that I just love about ownership. It's not about me bringing something. It's about basically opening a window for others to see it, to take it, and to do it in their own communities. And just today, and this is my closing comment, just today I received a photo on app from the group in Rotterdam, how Willem and his brother Joseph, they're working with this challenge to bless someone else. So they went to Joseph's mother, and they said, what can we do for you? And they cleaned up the whole shed. It was just a complete mess. And Willem and his brother, they did it together, and they sent me this proud picture at the end, like, this is how it looks like now. They did it, they took it, they blessed his mother, and his mother is like, wow, why are you doing this? And this is again an opportunity then for Willem to say, well, I love Jesus. And that's ownership. That's where ownership leads. It's empowering Willem. It's empowering Tom. And I can just dream of where this will lead. I mean, if we unleash many of Toms, of Willems like this, man, that's the wave. Back to you, Craig.
Fantastic. And I think what that says to me is that this beautiful idea that Jesus simply laid in our hands of go into all the world and make disciples is not only for Asia and Africa, although Asia and Africa have led the way, and I love that, but it's returning to Europe and I believe North America and the rest of the world as well, as young people lead the way. Okay, so looking back at those 4 keys for mobilizing young people, the sense of belonging, absolutely crucial. Giving them ownership. Holy smokes, we got to get our hands off. We got to get our hands off and stop micromanaging them. We have to give them ownership. Thirdly, this idea of mastery. Every young person wants to learn and grow. And what better way than to learn and grow through hands-on discipleship? So often we think of discipleship happening in a classroom, but in real life, we want to follow Jesus in everyday life. And so that's how discipleship needs to take place. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, if we don't have a sense of purpose, and Vania called this a sense of idealism or vision, who has greater idealism and vision than the young people in our nations? Honestly. And yet we as the church have overlooked them so often and not called them to have a sense of vision for Christ's kingdom to come on earth as it is in heaven. So we have really seen these 4 principles playing out in every aspect of this discipleship movement. I believe these are the part of the reason why it has been able to spread into countries all over the world and reach thousands and thousands of children. I'll just finish now with some of the resources that we can offer you, because really anyone can take these resources and run with them. We don't care if you call yourselves Alongsiders or not. We simply offer you what we have. And we call it the ABCD of resources. We've developed apps because young people are on their phones, as we know, hours every day. For those who are partners with us, and particularly in certain countries like India, Rwanda, other countries, earning some kind of certificate is a huge blessing for young people. And then our comic book curriculum and discipleship training manual. First of all, the app. I just want to, let me see if I can show you guys this right here. No, you can't see that, but you can see it on the screen. And what I want to let you know is by the end of this month, we are re-releasing this discipleship app. This is a very simple way for anyone, anywhere, to make a group of young people and make disciples. It's called the School of Destiny. You can actually download it right now from Play Store, but I encourage you to wait for the end of the month when we have our latest version, which is quite a dramatic kind of upgrade. And that allows you to access discipleship training, animation videos, and training materials. We've developed a comic book curriculum in about 23 languages. This is a beautiful way for a young person to disciple a child through comic books. Fantastic resource. And of course, you need some kind of course material to go along with that. And we have our discipleship training manuals also in more than 20 languages. And very much seeing a lot of fruit as we take young people in a holistic way through connecting with God and connecting with their community. So that vision, which every single one of our churches has been commissioned to carry out, go into all the world and make disciples. I simply cannot imagine how we can do this without our young people leading the way. And I want to challenge you and invite you to be a part of what God is doing all around the world. Without our young people at the very heart of this, we are going to lose a generation. We're going to lose our nations. And we need to act right now, because 2020, things are ticking along. Things have changed, and it's our young people who are digitally informed and connected who are going to take us into the next season of discipleship, I believe. And so that is my challenge, and I believe Vania and Machan and all of our challenge to you tonight. So back over to you. I believe we're going back to David to finish us off tonight.
Thank you so much, Craig and Vania. I'm very stirred. I'm very challenged. I'm a little bit discouraged when I look at how many non-young faces are on the screen. We're kind of talking to the choir here. We're kind of talking to the wrong generation, if you will. That should be something that kind of stirs us. It kind of says, wait a minute, why are we as a group largely disconnected from the youth? When I was 20 years old, I spent 3 days with Howard Hendricks in a seminar on disciple making, and my life was transformed. When I was 18, I felt a call to change the whole country of Bolivia, where I was born and raised. I talked with my mission leader, and he said, David, your vision is too small. You're called to affect Latin America. When I was 21 in depression in graduate school, I asked our mission director what I could do. He said, come back to Bolivia, spend a year. I said, what does Latin America most need? He said, a person who is an authority in Christian education. I later understood that to mean a person who's an authority in how the church should work. So I cannot endorse enough, and I cannot ask for prayer enough for how do I break through to that new generation. I am really a long way away, and I desperately need help in doing that. Next Wednesday, not next Wednesday, 2 weeks from now, September 15th, we'll have our new webinar, which will be on the second to last of our frequently asked questions. How do we make disciples? We've taken some great strides today. It's just awesome to hear the practicalness of discipling youth. We'll be looking specifically at one-on-one and microgroups with the help of Greg Ogden, who's written Discipleship Essentials and is a tremendous authority in microgroups and who has incidentally transformed my life. I met him in April, and my life has never been the same again. I'm now leading microgroups in 8 different countries of Latin America because of Greg and Ralph Rittenhouse. We'll finish up our series a month later. We're going to start moving more towards about a month apart. And so October 13th, the last question will be, how do we make disciples at a macro level? So September 15th at a micro level, October 13th at a macro level. That is to say, how do we mobilize a whole church, a whole denomination, a whole organization to move into disciple making, and even a whole evangelical alliance at the level of a country. So with that, we're going to see our follow-through questions to discuss in our breakout rooms. I think that Val is going to share her screen. We have 3 questions, and if you can't get to all of the questions, the underlying question I always love is what most caught your attention, or what is God saying to you? The question that was previewed here to me was, are your youth making disciples? And you can run with that question, or you can run with what most caught your attention and what is God saying to you. But in both cases, take it to what am I going to do? Take it to some kind of application. How am I going to do something different in these next 2 weeks? So with that, Val, I think we'll go to our breakout rooms.